Hello, and welcome back to the Beyond Paranormal Investigations podcast. I'll be your host, Nathan Smith. For this episode, we have a guest with us, Cody Castleman.
I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you letting me be on the show.
Well, it's great to have you, man. You said you had a story about something that actually happened to your mom, right?
I do indeed.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and begin, man?
Okay, fair enough. Well, this all happened last year, at the beginning of last year. At the time, I was still living at home with her and my father. Um, this is before I moved out with my fiance, and at the time I was traveling a lot for work. I would go out of state, and I was actually traveling with my father, and we would leave my mother at home with her two dogs, just a week on end or so, and she'd just be at home constantly. Well, this all happened in Metropolis, Illinois. We were renting a house, and like I said, we had been gone for off and on quite a while. We'd come back during the weekends, and we'd never really experienced anything personally, initially. But she'd tell us these stories, and this is kind of what I'm getting into today. She said that it initially started pretty early in the year, about when we started leaving, and she noticed that she would hear noises in the house when no one was alone, or when no one was there, and it was only whenever she was alone. It all started off with the doorbell ringing, and she would be at the other end of the house, upstairs, in the basement, in the bedroom, in the garage, anywhere that wasn't near the door, and the doorbell would ring. And that was what freaked her out a little bit, was that it was never whenever she was near the door or could see the door or see, the window that was by the door. So she never knew if someone was playing a prank or what it was. But this happened recurrently over the course of about 6 months, just off and on. And sometimes it would ring 3 times a day, and sometimes it wouldn't happen for a week. And she knew that it wasn't just something she was hearing in her head, because her two dogs would react to it and rush to the door to see who was there. And every time, of course, she'd go, there'd be no one. And she lived in a pretty, open neighborhood where you could look outside and you could tell if anyone would be hiding or not, and there would be no one. And it got bad enough, finally she just had my dad disconnect the doorbell. And everything was okay for a little while, and finally things started up again. And what happened then was she'd be laying in bed at night, once again, all alone, in the house, with me and my dad out of the state, and out of town, of course, and her ceiling light would come on in the bedroom randomly, and then every now and then the fan would kick on by itself, and there was just absolutely no explanation for it. It was getting to the point where she just didn't want to be by herself anymore. She never felt as though she was in danger or anything was there to harm her. It just seriously creeped her out. And she had other experiences there. She would notice things during the day, even when it was bright out outside. She heard music coming from different rooms of the house when she was there by herself, and she would think that she had left the radio on in her room. And once again, the dogs would react to the music, and she would go into the room to see if there was no music playing at all. And she would hear footsteps upstairs. This was a relatively old house. This wasn't like a Victorian-era house or anything, I don't believe, but it was a fairly old house. And there were hidden doors in the walls that looked like there were a wall, but then you would look down towards the floorboards of the wall, and you'd see a tiny doorknob where you could open it, and it would be a hideaway space. And there were just numerous instances like that. There was 3 or 4 hidden doors in the house, and with relatively large rooms in them. Of course, we used them as storage closets, more or less, but upon some research, we realized these were actually what they had hidden so-called witches in back in the day, where they were just hidden rooms. And not to say that's what these were explicitly used for, but that's what similar rooms in the past had been used for.
Wow.
But anyway, yeah, it's pretty nuts. But we even were advised by certain people that we should, look into the little hidden rooms to see if there was any kind of symbols carved in there. or anything like that to see if there would be something that might be drawing some attention. And we never did see anything, but these rooms were old. I mean, it was nuts. And my mother, suspected that a lot of these rooms might have been even playrooms for kids back in the day. And because these were all in different bedrooms upstairs. That's really the start of it. Like, she had a ton of paranormal stuff that she felt like was going on there. Let's see. And she actually, she'd hear footsteps walking around while she was there by herself. And it was never running. She said it was always just walking, like they were just going from one room to another. And they'd go and they'd stop. And she says, let's see. She was also very unnerved just because she'd never actually met the woman who lived there previously. And she had no way of getting in touch with her because we just rented the house. And so she had no way to ask, had this been going on for a while? Was this something that had just started when we moved in? What was going on? Another strange occurrence actually happened to me while I was there in the middle of all this.
Before you get into that, y'all were renting the house, right?
Yes.
Your landlord never said anything about the hidden doors or...
No, not at all. Well, see, the way it worked was she was actually leasing us, or we were actually renting the house through a realtor.
Oh.
And we'd essentially give him the rent money, and he would send it off to her in Georgia, because she lived in Georgia at the time. So we never met our landlord at all, which technically she was the landlord, and if anything ever went wrong, she would have the realtor come by and let them handle hiring someone, getting them out there to fix the house. No, it was plenty of crazy things that happened there. Let's see, what else happened? One thing that happened to me while I was there, actually two things. The only two paranormal instances that happened to me while I was there at all. At one point, my girlfriend at the time was staying over, and in the middle of the night, she woke up because she thought she heard me get out of bed and go to the restroom and close the door, and then close the bedroom door coming back to my room. And of course, when she actually opened her eyes, I had been there the whole time and never got up once in the middle of the night. So doors were closing in the house as well. And the other instance that happened to me was that the day I moved out to move in with my girlfriend, which became my fiance, we were all moving. We had 3 or 4 friends over, moving things out of my room, which was upstairs, and we were in it, and also it was one of the rooms that had one of the hidden doors, and we were moving things, and we were just taking load after load, bedding and furniture and knickknacks and, everything that would be in a room out of the room, putting furniture. Well, we took one whole load out of my room and to the new house and came back. Well, when I came upstairs, my door was locked, and I couldn't get in. And the weird thing is, that door had a special kind of knob where we had no key, and there was no way that I understood to even lock the door. And I had never locked it in the 6 months that I had been there, and to my knowledge, there was no way to lock it. But it had not only had been shut, it had gotten locked, and I didn't shut the door or lock the door on my way out. So of course I asked my mother, had she done something? And she said no, and she had no idea what was going on, except for she just said maybe, it was something didn't want me to leave. And of course I kind of scoffed at it, and I was going downstairs and got a screwdriver, going back upstairs to see if I could pry the door open somehow. And of course, as soon as I touched the door to, just touch the door handle to move it one more time, the door was unlocked, and it just swung in on itself. Of course, it would lock on it locked from the inside, so there was no way for me to unlock it from the outside. But that was pretty freaky. It made me kind of a believer in the whole situation. I mean, I like to think I'm pretty open to the whole paranormal, and I don't know if I ever scoffed at her for her claims, but I just thought it could have been explained. Maybe she was at home by herself, and who knew what was going on is what I thought. And sure enough, that was my little experience with it. But the freaky thing is the history of the house and the history of the people that live there. My mother, on just a whim, went outside one day to take her dogs outside and met one of our neighbors. At this point, the activity had been going on for about a year at that point. And she asked the woman, could she tell her any history about the people who lived there? Excuse me. And she didn't tell the lady that anything paranormal was going on or that she had any kind of suspicions. She just asked about, the family who had previously lived there. And the woman told her this crazy story. And I have her quote right here. I'll go ahead and just read it so I don't miss anything. Let's see. In chatting for a minute, I asked her to tell me a little more about the people who had lived there. She told me that they were pretty strange. She said that the man was a former police officer from Georgia, and the woman had moved back there to live with her family, and that is why she put the house up for rent. She told me that they had not gotten along for a long time, and there had been a huge fight one night, and a day or two later, he had come down with some sort of flu and had gone to bed. She had actually said the following day, an ambulance showed up and took him out of the house, and he had actually died before they could load him up. Apparently, the popular opinion of the neighborhood was that the wife had actually poisoned him, and the neighbor told me that after he died, the wife up and moved without ever even having a memorial service for him. Keep in mind, I never told her a word of what had been going on in the house until after she had told me the whole story in much more detail than what I told her. Once she finished, I began to tell her some of my story, and she was in disbelief. Most of the experiences I was having turned out to be coming from the bedroom where the man had died, and they had to repair the wall in the room where he had, excuse me, they had to repair the wall in that room where he fell when the paramedics tried to move him from the bed to the stretcher and when he grabbed the wall. Apparently he was a very large man and he damaged the wall. I asked the neighbor what the man's name was, and she told me his name was Alan. She says, the next time I was in my room and my ceiling light popped on, I just said, okay, Alan, I know it's you. And then I proceeded to talk to him as if he was right there, and I told him I was sorry for what happened to him, but I wished he would stop all of the stuff that he was doing because it was starting to freak me out, and I didn't want to be there alone anymore. And it really seemed to make things straight and calm things down for a while. And then after that is when I had my experience. A week later is when I had my experience with my bedroom door. And that is what happened in the house in Metropolis, Illinois, and that's my paranormal story.
Wow, man, that's really fascinating, actually.
It was definitely something.
I'd like to know more about these hidden doorways and everything.
They were really neat. It was, at first I thought it was just a cool place to actually just store things. And these doors weren't high at all. They would only come up maybe chest high, and they looked like they were just part of the wall. Because it's hard to explain without a visual aid. They weren't wallpapered over, but the way the wall was cut, just decoratively, was the way all the walls were cut. And so you could walk by the door without even knowing there was a door there, until you looked down and saw just a tiny little brass knob right by the floorboard. You could reach down, pick it, or grab it, and the door would swing open. And what was nuts was when you got into the little room, it was actually a fairly decent-sized room. I mean, a full-grown man could stand in there upright and stretch both arms out in any direction. And, there was usually a little light, just a bare light bulb in there. And obviously it had been used for storage at some point. But
maybe a panic room of some sort.
Sorry?
Like a panic room of some sort, maybe? Oh.
Exactly. That's exactly what we had, theorized, that maybe this was some kind of room that someone was hiding in at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the guy was a cop. He would have been prepared for stuff like that.
Exactly. But, no, they were pretty sparse. It was just kind of a freaky place. Oh, and also, something I'd forgotten to mention before, after this had been going on for about 6 months, my mother was really concerned about, maybe trying to get Alan to leave, and we didn't know, of course, at this point we didn't know it was Alan, or who it was, or what it was. And someone had told us, I think it may have been even someone that she read on the internet, that one of the best ways to cleanse the house and try to remove a spirit would be to burn sage leaves.
Yeah.
Or dried sage leaves.
The Native Americans did that to keep the evil spirits away.
Right. And it just so happens the only plant that was even growing in the flower bed of the house when we rented it was a sagebush, and that just kind of even solidified what we thought of even more. We didn't know if it was meant to be there, or if someone previous had planted that in the same hopes that they were having the same experience as we were, and were trying to think of some way to get him out. But yeah, that was the only plant that was in the flower bed when we moved in, was this small sagebush. And that's pretty well it. I mean, there may have been an instance here or there that she didn't, ever report, but I mean, that's pretty well everything. That's about as paranormal as anything ever got there. That's the only kind of experience I've ever had in the house, were those 2 nights.
All right, well, thank you, Cody. I really appreciate you telling us your story and sharing everything with us.
No problem, man. I appreciate you letting me be on the show.
All right. Well, that's all we have for this episode. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in and listening to us. And if you have any stories to share with us, if you would like to be a guest on the show, if you have any questions, or if there's a topic you would like to hear discussed on the show, you can reach me at thebeyond_pi@hotmail.com, all lowercase letters. Again, thebeyond_pi@hotmail.com. Or you can join my group on Facebook, The Beyond Paranormal Investigations. Good night, and thanks for listening.